Hi, Gerhard Bloom, looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So I'd like to look at this, or entitle this, Barbarians at the Gate. I forget who the social theorist was, my apologies, but decades ago, I think, there was a theorist who argued that each generation confronts a wave of young barbarians in its midst. This group of barbarians, these are the young males in its midst, right? Adolescent males. They need to be civilized and socialized. The basic, most important institution for young males and young women, as it happens, but for social stability and in terms of crime and violence, the family, right? The family. Mother and father look after these kids. Young adolescent males, they need the discipline and role models that fathers provide. Very few, vanishingly few women can handle the strength of young adolescent male sons, right? No. When I was in junior high, I was bigger and stronger than my mother. I had a father around. And yes, more than a few times, he snapped my leash, right? Get your head out of your ass, right? And yes, I took notice and I listened. Now, the barbarians in our midst and at our gates, a flood, an absolute flood of illegal migrants. I don't know what the demographic breakdown for those coming into the United States, but there are significant numbers of poor, uneducated young men. And in Europe, Lampedusa, Italy, in the span of 2 days, over 7,000 illegal migrants washed ashore on this tiny little island in Italy. The local population, 6,000. So in 2 days, more illegal migrants landed on this little piece of earth than the entire population, the native population of Italy. And they're almost all young males. And in Britain, boat after boat of illegal migrants are washing ashore. They're coming over from France, which is doing nothing to impede them, and they're coming ashore. Now here's the rub. And no, the barbarians has nothing to do with race, right? There's certainly cultural aspects and elements to this that we need to be deeply concerned of. But young, aggressive males, there is absolutely no question that the serious, significant disproportion of violent crime coming out of the Black community is because these young men don't have fathers. They're not bounded to communities. Here's an interesting fact, right? You've heard that expression, right? Son's a son till he takes a wife, a daughter's a daughter all her life. This is distilled wisdom. A daughter, attached to the family, her parents, look after mom and dad. Young men, for millennia, have gone out to make a name for themselves, to gain some status, to gain some wealth, to climb that social hierarchy. Why? Because women don't marry penniless losers, right? Women marry across the social hierarchy and up. And in the inner city, you don't have men who need to go out and make significant degrees of wealth, right? They sling drugs on the street corner, so they acquire some wealth and reputations, but they're dangerous. And this, I hope to bring this together in some manageable form, but here's another saying, right? Mothers and grandmothers would tell their daughter, a man is not going to buy the cow if he can get the milk for free. In the inner city, if you're a young woman who wants to keep her virtue, you don't want to give it up until you get married or the strong commitment for marriage, God just passes you by. That's not the game that's being played in the inner city. So you have fathers that have several different baby mamas. That's right, babies with several different women and women with babies from several different fathers. These kids aren't being raised properly. And these young men who aren't bound to a family are dangerous, marauding the streets, extremely violent, engaged in the drug trade. If I'm a drug trafficker and some other drug trafficker rips me off, I can't exactly phone the police to say I've been ripped off, right? Violation of contract. No, it's settled by violence. And that's exactly what's happening in the inner city. When a young man gets married, right, it binds him to the community. He has an interest at stake in protecting his family and providing a roof over their head, food for them to eat. It civilizes them. You know, those barbarians, those young adolescent males, when they get married, they turn adult, they get married, they have a family. It binds them to a community. And by binding a young man to a family, his family, it binds him to the broader community. It civilizes them. Here's the issue with a flood of hundreds of thousands, millions of illegal migrants. And in Europe, the vast majority of whom are single males, right? Young males. Who is going to marry them? In typical societies, there's a basic even distribution, 50% men, 50% women. But when you get millions of young men flooding across, who are they going to marry, right? And what woman is going to want to marry some guy who has very little education, very little social skills, very little marketable skills? This makes this crime, violent crime, absolutely inevitable, right? And sex. We're particularly the male animal does not have a genetic drive to reproduce. Males have, this is a misunderstanding of the levels of evolutionary analysis and psychology. Men have a desire to have sex, right? Not to reproduce. Reproduction is the ultimate evolutionary explanation, right? Your genes, male genes, they want to have sex. It's in the gene's interest to produce those desires to have sex because it results, before birth control and abortion, results in pregnancy. So the genes get their way. Just like we don't have an interest in eating to stay alive, to feed the body, not unless you're in some plane crash or stranded on some desert island. You eat because you're hungry, but it's the gene's way of getting you to feed yourself. You find eating rewarding, right? Pleasurable taste and all of that. Same with sex, right? Now, women are not going to mate preferentially with males who have very little future prospects. This is a fact. Why? Because women are hardwired to be socially sensitive to status cues. Throughout human history, women who mated with and bonded with a highly successful male could ensure the relative success of their offspring. In primitive societies, a young woman whose mate was killed in hunting or died or got pregnant, inadvertently, she ended up oftentimes dying. If she kept a child, very often her child died and then she died. Because males in these primitive environments where scarcity of resources is such, they don't want to raise somebody else's genetic basket. They want to raise their own. Very harsh environments. So yeah, you have infanticide being widely practiced in primitive societies. So we can expect with this flood of men, young males, whose aggressivity and sexual urges not going to be satisfied in any legal outlet. Expect high levels of violence, including sexual violence. This is going to be dangerously unstable. And in the Black community, as I say, there is no question that this higher level of violence and criminality is a result of single parenthood. When Patrick Moynihan first raised the red flag about this problem in the Black community, single parenthood rate in the Black community was 25%. 25%. The white rate was 2%. Now in the Black community, after decades of welfare dependency and this failure to get married and denigrating of the family, over 70%. That's nationwide. In the inner city, almost nobody is married because the men know they don't need to buy the cow. They're going to get the milk for free. You don't want to give it up? There are plenty of women who will. Adios. So very dangerous. And this is happening in the white community. Remember that 2% in the 1960s for the white family? It is now 25%. And in single parenthood in the white community, the prospects are equally as dire. J.D. Vance, Hillbilly Elegy, speaks of this problem. Chemical dependency, violence, criminality, welfare dependency, in the white community too. But I tell you, like with this flood of illegal immigrants, we ain't seen nothing yet. There's zero prospect that this barbarian horde is going to be tamed because there's just not the mechanism to do that. There are not enough young women out there who will marry these men who come across, can't speak the language, have no marketable skills. We live in a post-industrial society. So there's only so many jobs for waiters and busboys and, janitors. No, these men, criminality, violence, and it's not race. And we are doing them no favors at all. And there will be a great deal of resentment when the great hopes and promises that they've imagined when they come to the free world, and yes, the Western world is free, the promise failed to realize. They will be socially outcast. They will be dependent on government handouts. And no matter how generous those handouts are, they will be deemed insufficient. And with great problems ahead. Europe has got to turn the ship around, and as does the United States. Did the video on the death spiral of New York City as it being the New York City death spiral, a microcosm of America. In Europe, this is happening at a much faster pace, and the situation is becoming extremely dire. And there's already a rape crisis in Europe driven by young Muslim men, and that is a fact. Anyways, I hope this wasn't too rambly. Thank you so much for your time and attention. If you enjoyed the video, please do drop a thumbs up. And yes, check out my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. Not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues could not be more important. And I do discuss the evolutionary rationale and the importance of the family and the breakdown of the black family at great length with significant more detail. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Bye-bye now.